would you give support as if your audience was like, that's not true. That would never happen. There's no way in the world. Other than that, we can move into the next phase. So keep that in mind. However, then once we concede and we acknowledge, all right, that sounds like a good idea, we need to refute or make a rebuttal, right? This is where we are going to say or give some kind of transitioning phrase or word, like it says, an answer that challenges a specific claim or change. So if they're suggesting this claim, we are answering and responding to it with this refutation or with this particular rebuttal. Your job is to use some kind of transitional phrase that illuminates why they are incorrect. So what is it that they are incorrect about? Although this was an idea that worked in the 1980s, technology and science has come a great long way, and we've been able to identify that it in fact no longer is necessary to do it that way. And then you'll bring in some evidence. So that would be the idea. And then we have the counter argument, the other side of the argument. So what you'll do is you'll make your claim. Although that did sound good, this is, however, the way that it's done now, and then we are going to go in to provide some kind of claim and evidence to support what we are talking about and prove our point or our position true. And what are we going to do with that? We will bring up either proving theirs, yes, you can like prove it theirs, it can work to prove theirs untrue if you need to, but usually it'll be to prove your way of thinking correct. And that means that in those solutions, right, what are we going to do? Not in the solutions part, but in the causes part, we can bring up, when we show our counter argument, we can show how our area is going to work, or our idea will help to alleviate. So if you flip over onto the next page, what you're going to do, mind if I take this? Okay. If you are looking at the next page, which is on page 12. Oh, you know what? Oh, wait, going back to page, where is that? Page 11, because I really love page 11. So if you see the first one, this topic sentence, introduce the opposing side's arguments, you will see some of these great transitional phrases. Some critics argue, assert, contend, claim, state, and it may not even be some critics. You can say many believe, some believe, the government believes, right? The majority of the government believes. You can start to qualify to whom is this audience who's thinking about it. So it has been argued, asserted, contested, or opponents argue and contest. So you can write it in a couple different ways depending upon who is there. But if we look at this sample, it takes you on the step-by-step guideline here on how to write it. And I think that this is a great way to look. So if you look on page 12, this thesis is for, and it's asserting that individuals who have a 3.2 GPA and above can have an open campus for lunch, or an open campus policy. Did you ever have an open campus policy?
Yeah.
Yeah? How'd it go?
I loved it.
See?
Yeah.
And were you like, that's it, I'm going to ditch and do bad things all the time? All right, let's hold on, let's see what happens. Now, the rest of you did not have an open campus policy, probably because of some of the reasons here, so let us look. So we will examine the research of the opposition, which you know, and hopefully you've come up with at least 2 to 3 reasons or those opposing ideas to yours that you can bring up and argue against, so that people no longer have that thought and they can take on your proposition. We'll begin with that transition word, like I said, and whose opinion it is. So it says establish like the cause, right? So the first reason that an open campus doesn't exist, which we know using that parallel structure, is that many school administrators think that an open campus would be a temptation for students to cut classes and act irresponsibly. So are you like, oh, well, I guess you're right. Oh, y'all, because we need to counter-argue. The right thing is for them to go out and have that time. So now we need to argue back. So the first reason, there we go. Now we need to go with our concession, right? So we need to concede. Although this may be true for some, right? And is this a true fact?
Mm-hmm.
Of course! Some people may, in fact, what? Break the rules. But does that mean that everybody's going to break the rules? No. So here comes the idea. Although this may be true for some, concession, consider the reality, refutation, that if a student wants to find a way to cut class or act irresponsibly, they will do so regardless if those policies exist. An open campus policy is not going to change that type of student's behavior. So my argument to them is they say that if we let you do that, students will act irresponsibly and ditch. And I say, although that may be true for some, that is not reflective of the entirety or the whole. And it is not a reason to cut the open campus policy because of a couple people, right? That's the concession and refutation. Now I'm going to argue that one person can't be the responsibility. So I said, in a high school with similar demographics to Sean, called Scotch Plains, Principal Ryan Adams reported that 97% of students maintain their honor roll status after 3 years of open campus, and only 2% of students overall receive disciplinary action for breaking the open campus rules. Now, to you all I say, well, what does that statement mean? What does that evidence prove or show? Because we can't just let evidence sit there, right? We need to connect it back to your
central idea.
The central idea. And in this case, also this main point of proving them wrong, right? So now we explain how our quote defends our rebuttal. The small number of students breaking the open campus policy held demonstrates the open or closed system had no bearing on behavior. And let's be logical. Bottom line it here, everybody. Honor roll students are not going to risk getting a bad grade by doing something like ditching school. We know those individuals. Their grades are very important to them, and this all could be risked with that. So students who earn the privilege of open campus will be unlikely to jeopardize that privilege. And the rules that I will propose later could be used to rescind that privilege after the rules are broken. Thus, the concern by administrators into holding on to existing policies out of fear of responsibility is not valid and should not be upheld.
So for this, is the quote actually number 3, and then you explaining it is actually the A under it?
Oh, don't worry, no.
No?
This is not outlined.
Oh, okay.
This is not outlined with any symbols that you, here is how it would be outlined.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you? So it says, here's what it would look like if you were, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there that is. So go ahead and look through that if you wanted to. It shows a little bit how that would be organized. And then I went into and then it goes into the second one, again, just in how to do that. So for each of you, I think the important thing that I want you all to know is that you're going to make the claim, and then you're going to give a concession. This idea was a good one. In rural Indiana. But unfortunately, California is much different than rural Indiana. And therefore, individuals are going to be less likely to adapt to a policy like whatever, right? And then you can show the evidence. So we will concede, then we will refute, good, and then we will counter argue with some piece of
evidence
that suggests that you're correct, you're right, they are wrong, whatever, however you want to do it. And then finally, that will draw you back to the proposition. And that is why we should take on your particular issue, right? Because this no longer exists, because it's not an issue, because it's an outdated law, because that's a ridiculous comparison, because it's not the right way of thinking, whatever you want to say, that's why we need to take it to the next step. Does this make sense to y'all? This is an easier, at least in my opinion, main point for you each to write. But does it make sense on how to go about it, what you're looking for, the reasons, how to write those in a simplistic way? What a refutation or concession or materials are? Yeah, everybody kind of?
It's just like an essay.
Okay, great! Yes, absolutely. So if you were writing, like an essay with just regular paragraphs, so if you were doing like a topical organization, right? Then you would do, like, lay out your first issue, give a like counter argument. Good. You feel good? All right, team, then I'm going to assume that these looks or that you're good.